Hi, and welcome to A Victorious Life, an outreach teaching ministry of the Shiloh Holiness Church, located at 2419 North Glass Street in the beautiful city of Roses, Tyler, Texas. I'm your host, Lori Simpson Ortega, and as always, we want to say thank you for allowing us to come into your homes by way of VPN broadcasting and also by way of the internet. Mr. Cameraman, I got to start by saying Happy New Year.
Yes.
Happy New Year, 2017. All right, let this be the year that we go higher and higher in every part of our life. You know, let's focus. Let's focus on that. And I'm not here to tell you not to do New Year's resolutions. I personally don't do them. And I've said this before. I try to have not really every year, but I live my life in increments of 3 to 6 months. You know, this 3 months I want to have this accomplished. By this 6 months I want to have this accomplished. And so I have some things that have carried over for 2-3 years, and that's because of the magnitude of the project. So but have a plan. Let's have a plan for 2017. You know, if you've been, and here comes Miss Cameron, just tell me, just let it go. But if you're in a relationship, you know, you're a young man or young lady, especially young ladies, because I come in contact with y'all all the time, and you want to get married, and you've been going out with this man for 10, 11 years, you know what? He may not marry you, okay? Let this be the year that you say, you know what? I gotta shake the tree. Whoever falls off, they just fall off. You know, those of you who have been saying, I'm going back to school, I want to learn a trade, or let this be, you're getting older. Let this be the year that you do that. Those of you who say, you know what, I'm in a dead end situation on my job or dead end career, take the initiative this year to say, you know what, this not working for me. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do better. I'm going to have better. I'm going to live better. And then when you have that pep rally with yourself, then like the old people used to say, go to the Lord in prayer and say, Lord, look, I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to have better. You see my situation. Help me. But let this be the year that you finally accomplish some things that you would like to accomplish. And I want to say this because it ties into, this is part 2 of the lesson from last week. It ties into what we talked about on last week with Jesus in Matthew chapter 5-7. He taught and he said some amazing things. The Beatitudes basically, be of this attitude, be of this mindset. He talked about those in chapter 5. And then in chapter 6, he talked about prayer and forgiveness and where you are to put your focus. And I do want to read that verse because it is a new year, new mentality, new ambition, new focus, etc. Verse number 19, Matthew chapter 6, verse number 19 says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Verse 20, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. And verse 21, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So I'm saying in 2017, don't allow people to write the definition for your word treasure. Okay? Understand that in those first chapters, Jesus is talking about a lifestyle overhaul, a lifestyle change, a mentality change that's triggered by a spiritual change. And that's what we're really trying to focus on in his teachings. We went back since the beginning of the year. We've gone back to Matthew, and that's what we really pray that you are gaining from the lessons and the subsequent lessons, etc. Is that there comes a point where you got to do some things, like people will say, and there was a sermon that I said, I remember saying this. Sometimes in life, you got to do some things that you just don't want to do. You're going to reach that point Okay. And I understand that can be frustrating. But my point is, when we entrust our lives to the Lord, we should allow Him to place us where we need to be placed. Now I believe God gives us gifts, talents, and abilities. Now, personally, Mr. Cameraman, I like the new Steve Harvey. Okay. Notice I said the new Steve Harvey. And what I've noticed about his evolution is when he was just a flat out comedian, he was just chasing money. It was all about money for Steve, money for money for him. I need this, I need that. But as he began to evolve, he began to realize, wait a minute, what I say is powerful. What I do is influential. So what did he do? He did pretty much the same thing Oprah did. I can either add to the foolishness or the madness, or I can use the talent and the gift that the Lord has given me to help other people and to make a difference. All right. And what you're noticing now, you're seeing him doing more wholesome things, because it's less about, I'm just doing comedy, I'm here to make you laugh. Now I'm here to make you think. Okay. So I like the new Steve Harvey. Now, there's a book he has out now called Jump. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, it doesn't have any profound spiritual information in it, but I do think, having read that, I do think people should, if you're having a hard time figuring out where you are and you praying, the Lord will guide you. But it's okay to read some other learning enhancement materials. I read all the time. One of the best biographies that I've read is Shaq's. Read his totally different perception of him now. Okay. Now, is that going to help me get any stars in my crown, or help me to walk my live my heavenly spiritual life better? No, it gave me some sound business principles, and it helped me to see how some people give back, etc. But let this be the year that if you're going to model the behavior, that you say you want to be better, model the behavior of Christ and enhance your learning. And one thing about the book that Steve Harvey said, he gave the definition for gift. And while I know the definition for gift and had known it for many years, it's the way that he said it that I wrote it in a planner, and I was sharing with somebody else. He said a gift is a God-given ability that you don't have to, it doesn't require much energy for you to do. And you don't care, you're going to do it whether you make money or not. Okay? So that's what you need to ask the Lord to reveal to you this year. What is your gift? What talent? What gift has he given you? Because as believers in Christ, he has an amazing life set for us and planned for us. But we've got to make sure first and foremost that we're modeling his behavior. If he prayed to the Father for strength and guidance, instruction, why do we think we're constantly turning to people? What do you think I should do? What do you think? You can some of this stuff. Now, again, I am an advocate for reading books, but when it comes to my life, my walk with Christ, I don't just turn to any book for that. I acknowledge him. I pray to the Lord. Lord, I don't understand. What should I do? And what he does? He gives me directions by way of his word. And sometimes he will confirm that by way of other people having conversations, a believer or an unbeliever. He confirms it by the actions of other people. We were talking about a situation that occurred, and I was saying to myself while that was happening, Mr. Cameron, I was thinking, you know what? Okay, Lori, you have two choices. You can either be upset and angry, or you can look at this as a sign, a confirmation from the Lord that okay, we're going to need to change some stuff. All right. Did I, yell at? No. I have entrusted my life to the Lord. So now after the situation, when I went to pray, it's like, okay, Lord, thank you for letting me know that. So Lord, lead me, guide me, direct me, show me where you would have for me to be. But you know what's interesting? Lead, guide, and direct, same definition. It all means the same thing. So what are you really asking him for? We're asking for him, navigate me safely, every part of me, to where I need to be. Navigate, not I'm over here alongside. No, you navigate me. So if I'm going to the right, and now you need to be over here to the left, be the navigator. Take what that song, Jesus, take the wheel. Okay? So we see him again modeling that behavior. So we get down, and this is part 2 for those of you tuning in. We get down to Matthew chapter 8, verse 5. So he's healed the leper, and we explained that on last week. When you get to verse number 5, it says, and when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, or Capernaum, as my father would say, there came unto him a centurion beseeching him. Okay, now, during chapter 8, there are three miracles within this chapter. All right, actually there's 4. You've got him healing the leper. You've got a healing of the centurion's servant. You've got Peter's mother-in-law that's going to be healed. And then you got other people that didn't have any names. And then you've got him speaking into the elements. So I want you to notice with those, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, with those 5 things, even though they're all in the same chapter, each of these things addresses a different need in man's life. All right. Each one of these things are there to help us to grow spiritually first and then naturally second. Okay. So when we talked about the leper on last week, the leper's spiritual lesson to us, or for us spiritually, is that we must show compassion. Okay? We have to model the behavior that Jesus modeled. We got to stop passing judgment, automatically judging people based on their physical appearance, what they wear, what they drive, how they look, where they work. You got to let that go. Okay? You got to let go of judging people who don't go to your church, aren't in your denomination. You gotta let go of judging people who are on welfare. People who have 50 million children with different fathers. Again, and that can go both ways. You gotta stop that. So I guess what I'm trying to communicate, Mr. Cameraman, is that lesson, because Jesus touched a leper, he did the opposite of what he had been trained and taught to do. Okay? He stepped out of his comfort zone. He stepped out of the box to meet the need of the person where they were. So a lot of these misconceptions that we have about people, we've got to really understand some people only operate as far as they know. If they haven't been taught, we'll say a lot of these young men haven't been taught manhood. You can't expect them to pull their pants up and walk around like men, because they may not have had that behavior modeled and are talked to them about. Okay. So, and then, a lot of these young ladies who have children by a lot of different men or fathers or what have you, you have to, what was going on in their home when they were growing up? Did their father or their mother teach them the attributes of a keeper, per se, or a tosser? Okay, did they do that? So for the leper, that was the lesson. Meet people where they're. Show compassion. Don't be quick to judge. You're here to usher in life. You're here to usher in a better way of living, a better way of thinking. The natural lesson is, well, another natural spiritual lesson we should have learned from the leper is that Jesus told him to go show himself to the priest. So that means that he was Jewish. That means he was a temple. He had, at some point, he had to have been a temple dweller or was a temple dweller, church goer. He knew the word. He knew the law. Meaning he knew, when I say he knew the word, he knew the Levitical law for his condition. So just because a person goes to church does not mean that they do not have needs. Just because a person goes to church doesn't mean that they have it all together. And the next thing is, just because if you're one of those people, Jesus was also saying to this person, okay, you know the Levitical law. Don't get caught up in the trapping of I'm just going to church. I go to church. You get caught up in, you ask people, where you go to church? They tell you, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I love my pastor, not I love the Lord. I love Jesus. I love my pastor and my first lady. Okay. All right. Nobody telling you shouldn't. But what happened if they left? Would you leave the church if they left? What if they decided to move to another state or another country? Would you follow them? Would you still go to church? So that's what the lesson was for that. So he's doing those things, not just for the sake of doing them, but he's teaching lessons. So then we get down to verse number 5. He comes into Capernaum or Capernaum, is either or, and there comes to him a centurion. Now notice in this particular, with this particular miracle, they reference the man not by his name. You don't have anybody, no names are given in these miracles. You're not given a name, like even if they're demon possessed, you're not given anybody's name. So this man is recognized by Jesus or by the writer for his title. Now, a centurion, of course, was a soldier, a Roman soldier, a Roman officer who had different ranks of men assigned to him, and he was, responsible for them from a military standpoint. Now, what's the irony in this is you got to understand natural or secular history. During this time, the Jews were Rome. Romans were dominating the then known world. So they were the not just the political power, but the military power that was in place. So you have a Roman soldier, a Roman officer, ranked officer, who's coming to speak with or to encounter a one of his subjects per se, a subservient, enslaved ethnic group. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think it's interesting for us to point that out because this centurion came to Jesus. If he was a ranked officer, excuse me, if he was a ranked officer at any time, he could have sent whoever to go and get Jesus and bring them to him. But look at what he did. Knowing who he was and what he needed, he humbled himself. He didn't care about his title, his position, his authority, his rank, his standing in the community. He didn't care about any of those things. He knew that he had a need. Even if the need was not his need, it was directly related to him. So he put aside all of those things and he went to go seek out Jesus. All right? Now, that's the first thing I want you to think, to understand. He did not introduce himself as a centurion. Okay? The writer wrote his title. Okay? And remember, the writer in verse number 5, the writer didn't say all this other stuff that the centurion is going to say. Verse 6 says, so the centurion came to Jesus and he said, and beseeched him, meaning he wanted to ask him. He wanted to ask him, just like the leper. Remember the leper said, if you will, you can make me clean. Basically, if you want to, and if you think I'm deserving, you can make me clean. You can heal me. So the centurion came to him beseeching him, basically asking in a way by trying to say, he probably said, okay, you know what, can you, will you, etc. But look at what it says. It says, and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. Now, this is what I want you to think about. Notice he said, Lord, okay? That means he's now putting Jesus on his equal. They're on equal standing, regardless of rank, ethnicity, who's in power, who's not. They're equal. He says, Lord. He wasn't saying like, you are my Lord. He was saying, Lord. He was respecting him as he was giving Jesus the respect that he deserved, per se, from a professional standpoint. So he says, Lord, my servant. Now, that within itself, that was probably not presented wholeheartedly the way history tells us. Number one, 9 times out of 10, it wasn't his servant. It was his slave. Okay. So he's here on behalf of somebody of his subordinate. Okay. And he's asking for somebody to be healed that's not technically a physical part or that's not a part of his family. So he says to him, he says, Lord, my servant, or we can say my slave, is at home sick of palsy. Now, palsy is a disease that affects the neurological system, a muscular system, and all those things. It's similar. During the time of Jesus, it was similar to muscular dystrophy. So this slave has something that's going on where basically they're no longer able to function, do their daily functions, because they're incapacitated. They can't. Probably can't feed themselves, can't take care of themselves, may not even be able to speak. Almost to the equivalent to the modern day equivalent to like Lou Gehrig's disease, where you slowly lose muscle density and all of those things to where you can't, you have to have 24-hour around the clock breathing. You can't even breathe on your own. So that is similar to what that is. And he says, so this servant or this slave of mine, he's sick at home, and he tells Jesus what the disease is. And it says he's grievously tormented. So the reason he said he's grievously tormented is because it had to have come at intervals. Like he'll have a good day, but then have like a muscle spasm, almost like a muscle seizure or what have you. So he uses the word grievously tormented, but realistically, those two words were the reflection of how he had to have felt. Because why would the centurion be concerned about a servant, a slave, a captured person, a purchased person? Why would he be concerned about that? Why would he could have been within his power to say, okay, you know what, well, whatever, we'll just replace him. But he said to Jesus that his servant is sick at home of palsy, and he's grievously tormented. Now, again, the way this is written in the KJV, the centurion gives the impression that he is saying the servant is grievously tormented. But I'm saying, because of the word choices, and when you look at the original Hebrew scripts or texts that have been translated, it's basically along those same lines. So one of the reasons we say, because there are similarities between the phrase that they use and those two words, grievously tormented, you're able to see that this centurion officer is also grievously tormented as well. He's grieving because he's in a helpless situation. He cannot help this person, and he's tormented because, again, he is in a helpless situation. But again, look deeper into that. The reason he is grievously tormented is because it's a situation he has no control over. Because he's in a career position that he has control over that. If they tell him we're going to fight from Gentry Parkway to 271 and you're going to secure Super One. He has a direct goal. He has a direct mission. He knows how to go about doing that. But this is a situation where it's been removed from his hands. And that's a lesson that a spiritual lesson that we're going to learn at the end of this miracle. And then Jesus, look at what Jesus says in verse number 7. And Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him. Okay. Now that's powerful. Based on what this man said, Jesus says, okay, I'll go do that. I'll come to your house. I'll heal him. Meaning I will physically go. I'll follow you just based on what he said. But look at what happens from verses 8 and 9. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof. All right. Now, the man came clean. And because he knew what was going on in his house. Okay. He knew what kind of activities had been, would be taking place. Okay. So he says, I'm not worthy for you to come to my house. But speak the word only. And he was saying to Jesus, but I have so much faith in you. I have so much confidence in you that if you say that he's going to be healed, even if you don't physically go there, I believe in you. And I believe you have the power to do that. All right. So that's what he was saying to Jesus. He was saying, if you just speak the word, he'll be healed. I believe. The servant's not there to believe Jesus for himself. It's just Jesus and the centurion. So that's where the faith was really coming from. All right. So I thought what I thought was interesting is because remember verse 7, Jesus said, I'll come. But look at what he does in verse number 9. And then the centurion says, I'm not worthy. Okay. But if you speak a word, all right, technically, it should have stopped right there. We should have went down to verse number 13 where it says, and Jesus said unto the centurion, go thy way. From verse 9 to verse number 12, those 4 verses should have been cut. 3 verses, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those 4 verses could have been cut out. But look at what the centurion did and what he said. And I submit to you, at some point we all do this. He says, for I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, go, and he goeth, and to another, come, and he cometh, and to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. Nowhere between verse 5 to verse number 7, where Jesus said, I'll come and heal him, heal the servant, did he ask about any of his title or any of his job responsibilities. Does that make sense? He didn't add this. That was unnecessary information. Jesus knows who we are. He knows what we need. We don't need to be like this man. We don't need to try to justify who we are. That's what society would have us to That's what society would have us to do, to feel like we have to justify. Well, what do you do? Oh, this is what I do. I'm this, and I do this. Who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And I'm going to be upfront, Mr. Cameron. I know they're going to turn the channels when I say this, but I got to come clean. I used to do that. Before I walked in the newness of the life, and before I really realized nobody cares, your goal is to please God, people would ask me, oh, what do you do? Instead of me just saying, oh, I'm a yellow plant. You know what I had to do? I had to give a job description plus all the accolades that I received doing the job. And I was so wrong for that. But the tragedy is, believers in Christ and society, a lot of people still do that. Does that make sense, Mister? A lot of people still do that. It's like, Nobody cares. We shouldn't. Oh, he's a doctor. Well, he may not be a good doctor. you know, that has nothing to do with my income, or that's not going to change my input or output in life, regardless. Oh, you know who that is. No, tell me, who is that? Oh, that's Miss So and So. She got money. Like, you can't say nothing to her. Okay, well, how did she get her money? Was it earned money? Was it aired money? Given money? Was it manipulated money? Was it conned money? Was it under the table money? Was it earned money? How no. I go to a lot of events and functions, and you see a lot of people who have lived in Tyler for many, many years, like old Tyler money. And whenever, it's always funny to me when I go to something and you see the individuals, and it's like everybody else is walking on eggshells. It's like, why? Their having money should not affect how you're living your life. If you're asking them for money for a charitable cause, all you can do is ask. If they say no, just keep it moving. But that's goes back to what we said on last week. Change. Let 2017 be the year you change your definition for life. And like we said, treasure. So what if your best friend? Oh, it's always funny to me now, the plight of not the plight of the Native Americans. But it's funny, the irony now is it's an honor to have any percentage of Native American in you. You know what I'm saying? Oh, my grandmother, she was a Cherokee. Oh, my great-great-grandfather, he was a Comanche, or he was a Chippewa or Kiowa. Well, that wasn't the case, a few hundred years ago. All right? But now that's an honor. So I'm saying, equating that example to this. Times change. Nobody really cares. And if we're not careful, we'll try to validate who we are to get people who don't care to accept us, and we'll be pushing God farther and farther back. We were talking, Mr. Cameron, and this is I'm hoping it's tying in what I'm saying to this, because when this centurion, when he was saying, I have this and I have that, and I tell people, that was irrelevant. Jesus said he would go to his house. Jesus said he would heal him. Jesus said, in essence, he would help him. So you'll meet people who will come to you, and they'll want prayer, and they'll want to know about Christ, and they'll start talking to you, and then they'll start telling you, well, I do this and I do that. That's when you got to say, you know what? All that is irrelevant. Well, I got a gambling addiction, because I've met people, I got a gambling addiction, and and I have a little drug problem, and I'll just be standing there, and I'm like, you know what? Irrelevant. Jesus said, if you can, he said, come unto me, all ye that are laden and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So I'd say to people, okay, while that may be, I'm like, well, thank you for sharing that. It's totally irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but do you feel better now that you got it off your chest? And they'll say, well, yeah. And they're looking at me like, I just told you I was a gambler. I told you I have a drug problem. Well, Jesus said, hey, if you're tired, are you tired of being a gambler? Yeah, you tired of having a drug problem? Okay, well, now let's give him something to work with. You're tired. He wants you because you're tired, and you've seen it's not getting you anywhere. But don't be, as Christians, believers in Christ, let us not be like this centurion. Let us not introduce ourselves with, who are you? I'm such and such, and this is my title, and this is this. Let that go. Irrelevant. I need a stamp that says irrelevant. Or if I had a t-shirt with a little light on it, every time somebody started talking to me about stuff that really didn't matter, it's like, irrelevant, So he says that to him, and look at what, evidently Jesus had to cut him off, because the man didn't finish. I don't think, from a writing standpoint, it doesn't look like he finished his sentence. He said, come, and he cometh, and to my servant do this, and he doeth it. Then verse 10, when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to them that followed. Now, let's make no mistake. Jesus didn't marvel because of the man's title. He didn't get excited. Oh, here's a centurion. This is my chance to really prove to Rome that I'm a good person. He didn't marvel at that. He marveled at what the man said in verse number 8, prior to the foolishness. He said, Jesus said to that man, verily I say unto you, I have not found, or he says, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Okay, look at what Jesus did. Jesus wasn't, when he says not in Israel, Jesus wasn't talking about the physical location. He was talking or alluding to the fact that the people who are saying that they are searching for God, that they are on his side, he's saying, I haven't even found that amount of faith in the religious crowd, in the religious community. Not the faith that this man had. And he says in verse number 11, and I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You know what he did? Jesus basically turned that into a teachable moment for the religious crowd that was observing. Because here comes this Roman, this centurion, okay, their enemy, coming to a person who was, who was basically their same ethnicity, who said he believed the way they believe. So you've got somebody coming to Jesus, kind of like the oppressor coming to Jesus. And you got all the oppressed watching Jesus to see what he's going to do. Well, you know what? You know what he was going to do. Because he just before, he showed compassion to a leprous man by healing him. So this would be no different. He modeled the behavior. So here comes the enemy in the minds of the people. The enemy coming to Jesus asking for something that Jesus has access to. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, okay, no problem. I'll do it. Broke with tradition, broke with the misconceptions, broke the misconceptions, broke the stereotypes, broke the expectations of other people, and did what the Father sent him to do: heal and restore all of mankind and humanity back to him. So what did he do? He went and he said, hey, yeah, I'll heal the man. But before he left, he said, I haven't found this kind of faith in Israel. It wasn't about the city itself, wasn't about the nation, because they had not been turned into a nation. I think they didn't become an official nation until like 1946. So there was no, nation of Israel. But he's like, hey, he was speaking to the religious crowd. And that's something that we have to understand. He begins to say to them in verses 11 and 12, he says, there are going to be a lot of people when this is all said and done. They're going to be sitting at the table and they're going to be feasting with the patriarchs. These people that y'all are praising and just having a grand old time talking about, there are going to be people that are not of our ethnicity, of our race, of our creed, etc., that are going to be sitting at the table on that day. Okay, but he then says again in verse number 12, but those of you who just went to church nonstop, those of you who just knew all the lingo, those of you who, well, my father was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, and my mother was a deaconess, and I've been preaching for 20, 40, 100 million years. I've been singing in this choir, I've been a deacon over here. He's saying those are the people that, although you were in the kingdom, you didn't have relationship with the king or the prince. So you're not going to be invited. He's saying he's speaking to the religious crowd. Why? Because they were not doing what they needed to do. Now, this is when I speak basically to everybody that's saying that they are a Christian. If you are a Christian, Christians or believers, they do what he requires them to do. And sometimes that's getting out of your comfort zone. He convicts your heart to be concerned about people, not just inside, but on the outside. You know, again, Mr. Cameraman, I hope you don't edit this out, but I'll understand if you do. Goes back to what we said. Just because you go to church, that doesn't mean you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Just because you have all, you can, I've seen people, they can dance or shout. I mean, it looks so choreographed. I mean, they can spin, they can jump, they can slide, they can moonwalk, all in their praise. All right. But before church is over, when the word is going forth, they're on their cell phones and they're not taking notes. They're on cell phones, Facebooking, texting, Skyping. But just when they think it's about time for the music, they put it up. And they dance and they shout and they yell. And again, before church is over, you need to read some of those posts or some of the text, or they'll walk out. And if it's within time frame range, if there's a club, we'll say New Year's Eve. Do you know how many God-fearing, church-going, regular people, regular church people are going to be on dance floors, backed up in corners, drunk as a skunk on Saturday night, all right? And turn around that Sunday morning preaching, singing about what God wants people to do. I don't understand that, Mr. Cameraman. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, now you're going to tell us that the Lord doesn't want us to be, you can't, he said you could drink a little wine for the summer's sake, but y'all be all drunk. Well, you was out there drunk last night, So he's saying, just because you go to church, just because you have the lingo and you hang out different places, you hang out with church, that doesn't mean you have a relationship with the Lord. He was saying to them, like he says to us, make sure you have what you say that you have. Make sure that you have a relationship. Make sure you understand, hey, he has a standard. There's a code of ethics that he has you to follow. And if it's acceptable for the world, that doesn't mean it's acceptable to him. So he says that to the religious crowd. And then what does Jesus say in verse 13? And Jesus said unto the centurion, go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the self same hour. So what did you learn from that? You learned that it was the centurion that had faith. It was the centurion that realized, okay, none of this stuff means anything if I can't get help for him. None of those things. When my father, when he was sick, he had another part of the house had been added on, and when he got sick, he was sitting in like his room, or he would sit in the living room. And he sat down there for a little while, but we realized he wanted to be closer to his room. So if he wanted to go lay down, he could go lay down or what have you. And when my mother got sick, she just basically stayed in her room. When it got to the point where, she wasn't as mobile, she stayed in her room. And I was sitting there one day while she was sleeping or resting, and I was thinking about it. I said, can you imagine, as large as this house is, you are confined to this one room. And if everybody decides to go to the other part of the house, you've got to rely on the kindness of somebody to come back and tell you what's taking place over there. And that was something that I was, that has really stuck with me, especially in my walk with Christ. You don't want to get so wrapped up and tied up into things and into people that you don't hear the Lord talking to you for himself. You know, when you ask the Lord, hey, what should I do? How can I be better? He will tell you. And he uses people to help you with that. But like this centurion, when you say, I'm going to stand on the promise of his words, then you don't have to convince him why you should do it for him or why he should do it for you and who you are and how faithful you've been. He knows. He knows. And then we see the next miracle is Jesus goes from verses 14 and 15. Jesus goes to Peter's house. Okay, and he goes to Peter's house, and he does this because he needs to rest. The multitude, the man's been preaching, he's been laying on of hands, he's been speaking the word. The man is tired. So he goes to his friend's house, okay, who happens incidentally to be a disciple. He goes to Peter's house basically with the intentions of resting. And that's a lesson that we need to learn as believers in Christ. I know that was something that I try to stay on top of it. You know, I've seen many homes broken up, many good families ruined because the person in ministry constantly just constantly going. And you got kids at home, you got a wife at home, she trying to raise the kids. When you come home, I'm tired. That's because you've been living your life like you single. You haven't had to pay. It's a different thing between parenting on the telephone and sitting there saying, "What I tell you?" No, where's your homework? Let's do this. So this is an indication. Jesus was physically tired. It's okay to be physically tired. It's okay for you to take a vacation. It's okay for you to go home and sit down and relax and watch TV. Now, me personally, a lot of you will send emails and ask me how I do the study time and how I'm able to do a lot of things in ministry. And you know what? I've got a comfortable schedule. I can tell you Monday nights, I'm not doing anything. Monday night at about 8 o'clock, we pray. Our family prays. And now we're not praying no 10, 11 o'clock, but we pray as a family. And I do laundry on Monday night. I pick up stuff, cook dinner. Tuesday night, I teach a Bible study from 5:30 to 7:30. So my family knows I get off work at 5. I head from the job to the Bible study. I teach that. I get home, we'll say between 6:45, 7 o'clock. When I walk in the door, I'm done with Bible study. Okay, I'm done with Bible study. If my kids need something, or we're laughing, or sitting around my husband and I talking, yeah, I'm done. Now, because I have kids, a lot of my study time and my reading time is done during the day. If I'm on a lunch break, or if I have some downtime at work, I'm not sitting there reading on no clock, Mr. Cameraman, got my big family Bible with highlighters. No, but if I say, hey, I'm going to take my lunch early, if I need to study something, I'll go sit in my car, or I'll sit there and I'll put the notice on my on the computer, and I'll sit there and read, and people know, hey, she's at lunch. But I also do study time after the kids go to bed, or when they're in their downtime. I'm not, and before I go anywhere, I'll say to my husband, I say, hey, you know what? They've invited me. Do we have anything going on? Do you have? And he's like, oh no, yeah, no, I don't have anything going on. But you got to take care of your family unit first. And when I say first, the Lord, He has called you. When He calls you, it's your responsibility to then say to them, hey, this is where I got to be. This is where we're going to be. Hey, arrange for transportation for your children, food, anything. But when you come back as their parent, their spouse, etc., because there'll be, you need that time. So this is an indication where Jesus, He went to Peter's house really for some downtime. But when He got there, look at what happens. Peter's mother-in-law, she had a fever. Okay? Fever is no big thing to us, but it was a major ordeal back then. Fever, when your body is going through a fever, it is fighting off infection. So it's heating up almost like an oven. It's trying to kill it, So the most contagious time is really not when you have the fever. It's just when you're starting to develop it. That's when you're most contagious. So by this time, she was in full scale fever mode. Okay, that means that based on that time, she could have been, in the process. They could have lost her. But look at what happens. And he touched her hand. So with this same hand that he touched the leper, he touched this hand of this feverish woman. And what happened? The fever left her. He healed her. And what did she do? She arose and she ministered. So she immediately, once Jesus restored her health, she went to work, helping other people. Do we do that? You see how he's modeling? We're learning the lessons of that model behavior, and he's showing and teaching us through these different miracles how we need to govern our lives. When the Lord does something for us, when he works out a situation that only he could work out, when he heals us, when he delivers us, when he sets us free, he restores us, we don't need to just let that go. We don't need to just get somewhere and sit down. You need to do like this lady. You need to start helping other people. You need to get up and share your testimony with someone else. You need to say, okay, you know what? Acknowledge he has made me better. So because he's made me better, and it was nobody but him, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my part. I got to tell somebody. I've got to share it. So that's when we get to verse number 16, and it says, when the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and he healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. So here we see Jesus. He's healed. He's broken the norm by touching and healing a leper. He's interacted with the oppressor, a Roman centurion, and he's reestablished he's reestablished the fact that, hey, he is who he says that he is. He's healed Peter's mother-in-law, who immediately, once she was healed, she got up and she started doing what helping out and trying to make a difference. And look, he's still not finished. Even he can't rest. And he sees multitudes, and they're bringing all these people who are possessed with demons, who sick and all that. And you know what? Look at that. It's a lesson to us. Jesus saw the need, and he was not satisfied until he met the need. So that's what we want. We want to leave you with that. We'll pick up in Matthew chapter 8 next week. But do we see the need? Do we see the need? Are we concerned about the need? It's not enough for us to say, oh, they a sinner. Child, pray for him. Let girl pray for him. What have you done? Have you shared Christ with the individual? Are you praying for them? How have you addressed the need? Because that's what Jesus really was wanting us to learn. That, hey, there comes a point where, like the leper, get out your comfort zone. Stop passing judgment. Meet people where they are. They have a need. Let them tell them about me. The centurion. We don't care what your title is. We don't care where you come from. We don't care what you have, what you don't have. Speak the word. Release Christ in their life. They'll be better. Feverish. There was a mother-in-law. Okay, you know what? Once he's done something for you, there should be that sense of spiritual obligation and that spiritual conviction on the heart to say, you know what? Because he did this for me, I can make it. I can help somebody else. And his healing and of the sick and the casting out of devils, all of those things, he met the need. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He was concerned about meeting the need. Well, you know what? We're all out of time. But we want you to join us here, same time, same channel on next week. And as we always say, if you have Christ, you're already a winner. If you have the Spirit of the living God, you can face any challenge life throws your way. You can live a victorious life. God bless you, and Happy New Year.